People who talk about evolution and don't like the word evolution, who don't understand evolution, often try to include the origin of the whole universe in their evolutionary bad mouthing. Evolution is what occurs with living things. And it has to occur once there are cells to be able to divide and transfer information from one generation to another. Information that can be selected for. If you don't have that, then you can't have evolution. Not biological evolution. Not the type of evolution that was described by Darwin. Now, Darwin and Mendel and tons of other people proved that evolution occurs. It's been proven and proven, and there's no information that shows otherwise. All of the information shows that evolution not only occurs, but is an ongoing thing that will always continue as long as there are life forms, even if they're not even sexually reproducing. With the great diversity that's brought in by sexual reproduction, you're still going to have mutations occur and some that are going to be selected for. There are a few organisms that are out there that are not known to reproduce sexually, but evolution even occurs among them, albeit much more slowly. But evolution is something that will always occur because that's a part of life. When you copy information from generation to generation, you have that information that can be selected for or even against, depending on what it is. So they try to throw abiogenesis in. They try to throw the origin of the universe, which I can talk about that too. But they want to talk about life from non-life, and then they will reach out and they will say, well, Rady proved that living things have to come from other living things. Well, Rady worked with flies, basically. But they had the idea back when that if you had a bunch of rags in the corner, rats and mice would just automatically come out of the rags magically, kind of like biblically, things just pop out of nothing. Well, it doesn't happen. They said, oh, you have meat there, flies will just magically pop in. Well, no, that was shown to be wrong too. Rady did that. Pasteur went even further and showed that bacteria don't just show up out of nowhere. In fact, after Leeuwenhoek discovered all the little tiny organisms in water and looked at sperm and looked at all these little things and did all the description, and Robert Hooke went around with his compound microscope and showed all of the things that can be out there in nature. After that occurred, people started looking at things, and then, of course, Schleiden and Schwann and Virchow came along and said, wow, look at that. Life comes from other living things. Yeah, it does. At least it does now. Because now, anytime something would start to come out of a non living material, obviously it's going to become a food source because we have life everywhere. And life is going to eat what is out there. That's what life does. It consumes other things. So it never gets the chance to evolve. Which brings us to the question, how did life happen to begin with? And you can say, well, there was this guy, snapped his fingers, and spoke a few incantations, and magically things appeared. Or you can look at the way things happen in nature, and you can see what's going on. Now, early on, Darwin said, probably in some tepid pool somewhere, you had all of these different chemicals get together and accidentally or by the natural reactions of chemicals form molecules, and the molecules working together until finally you had living things come out of it out of a long period of time. Well, that's fine, That's how it could have happened. But typically, the molecules that carry information have to have kind of a crystalline structure in order to form one. And so you need clays and things for these things to be able to get together. And you need the minerals. Minerals act like catalysts to attach them. And you find this more often on the deep sea vents. Of course, it can happen in a pool that dries out and then gets wet and then gets dry and then gets wet. But regardless, if you have these different elements, they are going to get together, as was shown by Miller and Urey. Elements will, under the conditions of nature, elements will form from gas into bigger molecules. Those bigger molecules will be proteins, and they will also be the nucleotides that make up the molecules that carry the information for life. It can happen kind of easily on a deep sea vent. It can also happen in comets going around the sun, where over a period of time it gets to where it gets radiation from space that's in the water, and back and forth until you have these molecules form, especially if you have minerals out there. And of course, you have minerals in that too. It could happen a large number of different ways. We know that molecules have come in from space. A meteorite hit in Australia, and it was just full of all kinds of organic molecules, with proteins proteins, amino acids, and maybe also some nucleotides. If you have something that's forming like that in nature, and without a doubt, molecules will form in nature, period. There's no doubt that happens. All you have to have are the gases. All you have to have are the elements, and you end up with molecules. They happen. If you have a structure that's constantly bubbling these things up and they're being heated, the interactions are occurring, they are having the chemical bonds form, they are lining up on a crystalline structure due to attractions. And then we know those attractions occur, electromagnetic attractions. They occur, and then if they're on there in the crystalline structure, the minerals are acting like catalysts and putting them together, you will have the formation of nucleotides. You'll also have proteins that get put together naturally as well from the amino acids that just form in nature. This happens, and it will happen, and it will continue to happen, but it won't form any type of self-replicating organism because nowadays things eat it. Although I will tell you, on the surface of these deep sea vents, where it gets much hotter than steam way down under pressure, there are microorganisms living there right now. So under terrible conditions, self-replicating organisms can survive. They're there. They've been discovered. They've been documented and studied. It happens. You can't get around it. You can lie about it. You can manipulate. You can say, oh, they say this. But truthfully, molecules do combine in nature. And you can like it or not like it. Truthfully, fats go towards one another. Lipids combine together. And water-soluble things go away from it and go together. So you have little droplets forming in nature. These little oil droplets, little lipid droplets can have proteins embedded through the membrane that helps deliver slowly things to the inside. That inside can become a reaction chamber. If something in that reaction chamber is putting things together, eventually it will fill up and it will bubble off as the lipid membrane collects more from the surroundings. It will bubble off and make another one. This happens also in nature. This has been documented that things happen that way. All you have to have are self-replicating molecules isolated from the environment by a membrane. That is what a cell is. That membrane is fatty, and the inside is the reaction chamber, and anything that goes through the membrane from outside to inside will bring in things that can be put together to form more self-replicating molecules. And we know that RNA is a self-replicating molecule. We know that RNA can carry out the interactions, the enzymatic reactions that happen in the cells of the body. Knowing this, and knowing that right now we have DNA where reverse transcription has occurred from viruses that have been brought inside and inserted into our DNA. Knowing that, we know how that occurs. It's quite evident that life came from non-living things. It's quite evident how. We haven't documented it, but in some sense we kind of have. Because when you see what goes on and you see how people have taken things and been able to manipulate them and go back, for example, as I mentioned before, using reverse transcription and then being able to use restriction enzymes to clip the DNA in bacteria and insert human insulin producing genes into the bacteria, then getting them to make human insulin and extract it. That is, in a real sense, what happened in nature. In fact, the techniques are techniques we learned from nature. Even Ventnor has, Craig Ventnor has gone, he and his team have actually created the whole genome of bacteria and created living things. So humans have already created, we know how that occurs. You can lie and you can say this is something that has to be, and we had to have some magical person snap his fingers and or magically say some words and magic comes out and this stuff magically happens. Or you can look at what happens in nature and you can see what occurs. You can follow the examples that nature gives and you can see how it happens. You can look at the way it occurs. You can look at what Miller and Urey did with their experiment, and you can come up with the way that things occur in nature. And if you have enough courage and are willing to learn, you can actually go out and create life forms yourself. You can take old life forms and modify them to make new ones. Even people that have had genetic problems have been genetically engineered away from their genetic problems. So we have genetically modified, genetically engineered people out there because of the knowledge that we have of how molecules work and how proteins are formed from the RNA that is formed from the DNA that came from the nucleus, or even in the case of prokaryotes, came from inside the cell, and how all of that stuff was put together from the elements that got together to form the different amino acids and the different nucleotides. We know how this works. The information is available. You can listen to people like Ken Ham, who said, oh, I have to have some magical being that made clay and then breathed the spirit of life into it, and that's how life happened. That's really magical. And before they thought air had a spirit in it. That's why things were able to needed air in order to be able to function. Now we know that it's the oxygen that's needed as the end receiver of the electron transport chain in order to extract 36 ATP instead of just 2 without oxygen. And we know that in order to be a higher level being, a multicellular organism, a big colony of individual living units that can live and do the things that we do, we have to have oxygen. We know that, and we know how that happened. And if you don't want to learn it, you can just keep on living and saying, oh, well, we had to have something breathe the life into something that was formed out of clay, made it out of rock, because clay is a debris from a rock. Yeah, all of the elements can go together and form the molecules that are necessary, and we can manufacture them from just the gases. And we know how that works. Or you can say, hey, magic occurs. And Everything happened by magic. And there's some kind of a magical force out there. Or you can go by the laws of nature and you can look at what has been learned and you can go even practice it yourself if you want to. And if you wanted to get out and study and learn how to do things and create your own life form with your name on it, you could do it because we have that knowledge now. But if you want to run around and say, I don't know anything, nobody knows anything, and I'm going to live in a fantasy land, you can do that too. Just let humanity go into the future and quit listening to people like Ken and Eric Hovind, Kent and Eric Hovind, Ken Ham, those people in Discovery Institution, the Creation Museum, the answers in Genesis. Quit listening to those idiots. Quit going to the stinking ark and listening to lies about how dinosaurs lived with people. They have no evidence. They're lying through their teeth. And they're doing it on purpose to get your money and to get your brain. And I don't know why they want to destroy humanity, but that's exactly where they're going. They're trying to drag humanity completely backwards into being chimpanzees that they claim they're not even related to, but that's what they want to be like. Don't be like them. Don't listen to those places like the Templeton Institution that are trying to make religion the same as science. It is not. Science looks for information. Science is the never-ending pursuit for information. It's looking to learn things about nature. And these things are destructive. Leave these people alone. Use your brain. Don't throw it down the drain.